Okay, we're going to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. I have a really cool review for you from the brand Nivada Grenchen. Originally founded back in 1926 and then later revived in 2018. The core idea is really to respect as much as possible the original designs and stick to authentic specifications while offering affordable prices. Their goal here is to provide what the Nivada and vintage watch aficionados are asking for. And this is definitely something that I think a lot of folks have in fact been asking for. Now, in terms of the category, I would consider this in the genre of an everyday watch. Some key characteristics and design when you're looking for something you can wear every day. Of course, you're going to want that versatile blend of sporty and dressy attributes. This also falls into the subgenre of an integrated steel watch. These are all very much back in style, along with the typical Gerald Genta designs. Everyone from Tissot to Tudor to Gerard Perregaux to Bell & Ross to Bremont have all recently taken a crack at the classic formula made popular by Genta. Even Christopher Ward has recently made waves within this space. But this is the Nivada Grenchen F77. This is the blue dial configuration with no date, and essentially the F77 is a Swiss-made reissue of the 1977 classic that is really uncompromising on the design and fit and finish. From that perspective, they really executed at a very, very high level here, and I'm very, very impressed with this piece in the metal. This actually goes for $1,260 direct from the brand, and it is actually a 37mm in diameter watch, which is very interesting. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay guys, so 37mm is actually a lot smaller than I typically would go for. I'm more of a 38 and a half type of wrist, especially since I do have a larger wrist at 7.5 inches. But this 37mm really has won me over. It's 37mm across. It is only 11.6 millimeters thick, which is very, very nice. The lug to lug is 45 millimeters, stainless steel, brushed and polished. It has this beautiful double domed box sapphire with inner AR coating. And as you guys can see, there's even like a highly polished rehaut that plays with the edges of that beautifully domed sapphire, and it just makes this piece really shine, figuratively and literally, which I really enjoy. That bezel, of course, definitely a huge callback to the Royal Oak. Very, very nice. The crown is screw down, and it is very nice. You can hand wind this movement. It's a Swiss automatic Soprod PO24, which is comparable to the ETA 2824. This also, another nice feature is it has no date, but it also doesn't feature a ghost crown position while you are setting the watch, which is nice. On the back side, you can see a nicely stamped and etched case back, which is beautifully done. And then when we come over to the front side, you see this very handsome and very period correct blue embossed carbon weave pattern dial, which is very nice. It has applied indices, polished hands with painted accents, that beautiful balance thanks to the no date layout. And this does have Swiss Superluminova that does glow green, and thanks to that screw down crown, you're also going to get 10 atmospheres or 100 meters of water resistance, and that is going to be a confidence inspiring 10 atmospheres because of that screw down crown. Now, it does have an integrated bracelet. Of course, the lug style is a little bit different than we're used to seeing, but again, this is a very accurate kind of recreation of the old school unit, and it's clearly done to a much tighter tolerance. Look at the way everything fits. That is really, really clean. You're getting a solid link and end-link bracelet there. It's going to be more of that kind of typical 3-link style, and it's going to taper from about 21.7 millimeters down to 16 millimeters. It has screw pin connectors as well, and this really nice milled push button clasp there, milled on the folding section, and then also milled on the clasp itself with a couple of nice manual micro adjust positions there. So very, very nice. Now, one thing I do want to kind of highlight, of course, is quickly the thing that I think is the most charming about this is the size. So let's compare this to the 40 millimeter Tissot PRX Powermatic 80, and you can see it's quite a difference. So the 40 millimeters, 40 millimeters and 37 there, that's, I mean, in watches it's a big difference, but when you think about the sheer numbers, they're actually not that far off. But you'll see here the main difference is going to be the proportions. Look at how wide and expansive that dial is, especially with those thinner baton indices. Whereas here on the Nivada, you get a much smaller, more centralized dial. You're getting a lot more presence from that flat brushed bezel. And so all of the charm that you would lose by, essentially not having, a flat brushed bracelet, you're getting a lot more now of action in terms of that flat brushed bezel. So it's a bit of a trade-off there. But I will say that is really one of the things that amplifies this watch is going to be that bezel, this case, the nice chamferings that are there. You can see they're a little bit thicker and more defined. Let me just give it a quick wipe here off camera so you guys can get a nice unobstructed view. So it does have a polished case side, but you can see the tops of the lugs are brushed, and that transition on the corner there is very nice. Look at that. Get that right in the light. Very clean, nice and thick, versus here on the PRX, it's still nicely executed, but it's going to be, let's give it a quick little wipe here. By comparison, it's a much smaller sliver, right? It's still nice. It's very, very sharp. And again, I think the PRX does a great job of looking very expensive and very retro, a lot more expensive than it actually is. But when we really look here, guys, the Nivada is technically twice the amount in terms of the price. So are you really hitting twice the amount of watch? And I will say, for the right connoisseur, you are. Because this has something that a lot of those other kind of Genta inspired watches don't have. This has the vintage appeal. So there's one thing to look retro, right? Retro designs. There's so many watches that look like this, whether they be Citizen, even Seiko has one, a really cool quartz one. And a number of other brands are creating new things and really more contemporary takes on kind of that integrated bracelet, kind of porthole watch design. But this crystal, the thinness, number one, that this layout, the physical layout on the silhouette here, it enables you to accommodate for this beautiful dome crystal. And that's something you just don't see on the competition. And it makes this very, very unique to this particular watch. I mean, it is just gorgeous. So with that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears really, really good. I'm like very pleasantly surprised because, of course, these types of watches normally wear quite large. And there's just something about this that is just so balanced. And for a 37 millimeter, wears really fantastic. And of course, another thing you're not going to see typically on these types of watches is going to be a clasp that allows you to get some manual micro adjust in there versus your typical butterfly style clasp. Of course, if I do get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to get a bit of perspective distortion. It's going to make the watch appear much larger on my wrist. But what I'll do is I'll keep my wrist nice and low here and then just tighten up the frame so that you guys can get a more detailed look, but just still while keeping a truer aspect ratio as to how this might render on your own wrist. Look at how beautifully centered that is. I might have to take a step back slightly just to keep it in focus, but look at that dial. The blue is just fantastic. Now the blue itself is very nice, but then when you add to that over that nice 3D texturing in terms of that carbon fiber kind of basket style weave, it is just really, really nice. It plays and reflects the light in so many different ways. You end up catching a lot of different tonality there. So that nice blue can go and really be versatile enough to match with a lot of other blues, whether they be, you know, your blue jeans, blue sweater, whatever it might be you're trying to match it with. The nice thing is, with all those textures, you're going to have more versatility and more options in terms of really kind of dialing in that nice match there. Look at how thin that looks. The visual on this one is fantastic. You have the high polished sides, which already the mid case is quite thin. You can see it does have a small kind of bubblish back. The nice thing is, though, because of that really short 45 millimeter lug to lug, you don't have to worry about the strap, you know, lifting off of your wrist. So while it's not something that really wraps around the wrist as good as some other more expensive watches, it sits atop the wrist still really nicely. And man, I can't get enough of this crystal. For me, the crystal is even more of a selling point than the dial. My goodness, look at that transition. It just really invokes that vintage porthole design. There's something that's very, very cool, very simple, and just kind of steampunk about the whole thing that I really do enjoy. So with that said, let's go ahead, get set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, so not a lot of Lume. Of course, even at this angle, because of that crystal, the distortion is probably even making some of the Lume plots a little bit more off axis than they would normally be if you're looking at the watch straight on. But one thing I always like to work on, of course, or I should say work in, is a bit of low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. Maybe even include a little bit of harsh lighting, which typically could expose any types of production defects. But all you're going to see here is some nice uniform brushing there. Look at the way the light glides right over that bracelet. And man, of course, that vertical brush on the bezel is just so eye-catching. The dial, guys, look at that dial. It just comes to life, almost like a snakeskin scale effect in terms of just the livelihood and motion you can capture just with some shifting light, which I really enjoy. And of course, again, that tonal blue that you're going to be getting is going to be very versatile. As much as we all love a light shade of blue, it can often be the reason why you don't end up wearing a watch, is because it just doesn't quite match with whatever you're trying to wear, within your wardrobe that day. So it is nice to have something, again, the versatility of almost as close to just a black dial, right? Except you're getting the fun, you're getting the pizzazz, you're getting that nautical touch with the blue dial. Very, very cool, guys. So closing thoughts, guys. This is the best wearing 37 millimeter silhouette I've ever had on my 7.5-inch wrist. The thin profile perfectly accommodates that box dome sapphire, which beautifully accentuates the smaller dial proportions. Now, that flat profile, it's just, in terms of the case, it sits atop the wrist more than it hugs it, yes. But the thinness combined with the shorter 45 millimeter lug to lug does make this a non-issue. So something to keep in mind. In terms of model variants, this is also available in a black dial or a smoked brown dial, which has a really nice gradient to it. Or you can get that, those options are obviously available with or without a date. Or you can get this blue dial option also with a date if you'd like. In terms of comparable models, there are more and more Genta-esque integrated steel sports models coming out, trying to get a piece of that luxury for less space. But I think while many of those competitors do still feel quite retro in their own way, Nivada really excels in adding a truly vintage, accurate flavor to this really, really awesome, highly in high demand, just recipe, right? It's like everyone's looking for that, and that 37 millimeter size makes it very versatile. There's a lot of people who feel like 40 millimeters for this type of watch is just too big, and then of course sometimes 35 millimeters can just be too small. So this 37 millimeter option, whew, this one is very close. It's the closest I've come to finding something that just fits perfectly. This does have, I'd say it is slightly on the small side, not on the wrist, but when, you know, comparatively to the rest of my body, it does give it a more vintage aesthetic though, by being a touch smaller, and definitely makes it feel a bit dressier. So take that for what you will. Maybe it makes it slightly less versatile, but I think that smaller size makes it versatile enough to wear if you have a smaller wrist. But if you have a bigger wrist, it makes it err a little bit more on the dressy side, which I think is fine, especially considering it has minimal lume, and you know, it's a very handsome piece. I mean, that bezel, the flat, ooh, it looks good. So for me, guys, bottom line, while I'd still love to see a 38 millimeter piece in this style, or a 38 and a half, I'd say the F77 has really won me over at 37 millimeters with its unique proportions and details. They really help it stand out from the competition, and I'm very taken by this. So that's just a quick little, actually not so quick, you guys know me and my videos, they're like normally 20 minutes long, but those are just some thoughts, and I'll actually be revisiting this piece because now that I have this F77, technically I have 3 Nivada watches, so I'll be doing a 3-watch collection feature in the future where I'll talk about this piece in greater length, as well as those 2 other pieces in my personal collection. So with all that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please would like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.